Hello and welcome everyone to the Evolve podcast, supporting you to connect with the power of your soul, to rise above all your limits, and to give and receive more love in all forms. I'm your host, Tanya Penny, an illness and trauma guide, spiritual alchemist, and author of the Connect with the Divine You book and journals. And I'm super excited to have a friend of mine, Joanna, Shakti, with us today. We're going to be diving into the topic love, sex, and intimacy, how singles and couples find and create soul partnerships. So, for those of you that are new to Joanna, she is the Soul Love Mentor and founder of Ecstatic Intimacy. And she is smart, sexy, and a little bit spicy. I will agree with that. You can't miss her passion and warm, playful style that both entertains and inspires. No other person on the planet possesses the experience, expertise, and ability to transform lives in quite the way Joanna does. She artfully and professionally mixes male female dynamics, leadership training, spiritual awakening, engineering, and even Tantra, along with a whole lot of love to lead singles and couples who hunger for deeper love and more sacred pleasure to find and create true soul to soul relationships. Thank you so much for being here today, Joanna. I'm so
It's good
excited to
to
have
meet
you.
you. I'm excited too.
Yay! So we actually got to meet in person a few weeks ago. Oh my God, it seems so long ago already. Yeah, which we had a lovely time. Joanna and I have known each other since January ish,
Yeah, that's right.
ish,
Yeah.
ish. Yeah, we're in a business coaching, if you want to call it that, more a soul coaching program together. So yeah, I'm excited to have you here today, Joanna. I've been yeah, just really curious. Even though I've heard bits and pieces, and before we started the recording, we were talking about your retreats. But yeah, I would love to just start with where did this company name, Ecstatic Intimacy, come from, and what does it mean?
Mm, nice question. So, ecstatic intimacy was actually the name was born over lots of years. This journey started out 20 over 20 years ago when I stepped out of the corporate space, but really even probably 3 years before that when I started to uncover the power of masculine feminine dynamics and the power of conscious love, including self-love. And so that journey took me out of a career in engineering and oil and gas,
I
where
don't think I knew that. I don't think I knew that.
yeah, I'm an electrical engineer by degree, with an MBA while I was working in the oil and gas and high tech industries of Houston, Texas in the 90s. And I was married to my college sweetheart, 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyed, par golfer, concert pianist, you name it. He was it. And he couldn't have loved me enough for me to actually feel loved. And not that there weren't some other challenges, but in that challenge, I was deeply challenged sexually. I was deeply challenged with love. I had no idea what self love meant. And so all of those pieces led me on to this path of sacred loving and sacred lovemaking. And fast forward to, I changed the company name about 7 years ago to Ecstatic Intimacy. And before that, it was the Center for Happiness, Love, and Pleasure. And so all of these pieces of this, the joy to be ourselves, the love, the connection with self, with other. I like to say love 360 degrees. And pleasure, passion, the goodness of life, and hence the intimacy that is part of ecstatic intimacy. It starts with the intimacy with self. It then opens into the intimacy with another, but with all others. Like all of our relationships can have a quality of intimacy, and we get so confused that intimacy is just our romantic partners, but that our romantic partners are the place that we can go the deepest in that. And then taking that even further, the intimacy with the whole, of who we are, our divinity, our sacredness, our humanity and divinity together, and bringing that intimacy in the wholeness, including our loving and our lovemaking and our loving of life. And really ecstatic is, when I hear you talk about the divine you, I think when we're in our divine you, if we're living at that highest expression, or even on the way to that highest expression, it takes our breath away. It renders us speechless. We can't fully describe it, but it moves us in a way that can bring us to tears, that can light us up. And so turned on as ourselves in our partnerships and in our lives, living our soul's greatest journey. And so that's the ecstatic part of the ecstatic intimacy, the depth of relationship and connection that we can have 360 degrees, and having it at the highest levels that we couldn't even imagine we could have.
You speaking, what you just said, I started to get, I call it chingles, chills and tingles. Because I think, there's so many pieces there that I just want to touch on. And I love it when you say it starts with us, because I think so many people get into a relationship with that old, what is it? What is that movie? Cocktail, Jerry, what,
Jerry
you
Maguire.
complete, yeah, you complete
Yeah.
me, you
Right.
complete me. Right. So here we are going to look for someone else to complete us, when really it all starts, like you said, turning ourselves on. It doesn't have to be even in a sexual way.
Oh,
You don't mean it that way. You mean it just like,
no.
just to be with yourself.
Be alive, to like who we are. And so the first part of this journey, that whether I work with couples or individuals, the first part of the journey is ecstatic authenticity. It's
Mm.
coming to know, who am I? What do I need? What do I desire? What are my turn ons? What are my turn offs? What are my boundaries? What are my weaknesses? And knowing all of that about ourselves, and still learning first to like ourselves and then eventually to love ourselves so much that we are willing to let ourselves be seen in the beauty and the mess, the strength and the vulnerability. And it is only when we are willing to let ourselves be seen in the good and the not so good, it's the first point at which we can actually trust love. It's the first point that we are actually available for loving and being loved. Because as long as we're hiding, feeling like some part of us isn't lovable, we won't let ourselves be seen, and we will constantly question the love that is offered to us. We'll constantly doubt it. And so
Well,
it's that,
and that
yeah.
makes sense, like you said, when you were first letting us know how you got into this, and you said he loved you so much. We're talking about blonde hair,
Yep.
6 foot,
Yep.
but he
Yep.
couldn't love you enough that you would ever feel loved. And when you say that, it makes me want to cry, because I've been in relationships like that, right? Where I had such little, I'm not even gonna say self-love, such little self-acceptance,
Yes. Yeah.
right? If you like on a 1 to 10 scale, I was at like a 0, maybe a 1. And it didn't matter what anybody else did.
No.
It didn't matter how much they loved me, because there was no, there wasn't enough to fill the hole. Let's just put
Right.
it that way.
Absolutely. There was a point where I clearly said to someone that was supporting me, not only was it 0, it was less than 0. I had negative self-worth. That's where I started. And so this journey back to loving and honoring self imperfectly, I still mess up. I am in this work, and it doesn't mean that I get it right all the time.
So glad you
But
said that.
hmm?
I'm so glad you said that, because so many people think in order to be able to, to teach, to guide, to support others, that we have to be doing it perfectly. And I'm still not doing it perfectly.
No, and not only that, I know so many people that think they have to have it all figured out before they get into a relationship. And there is an aspect of self-relationship that I absolutely stand for, that when we have that is where we have that foundation to actually build a partnership with another. With that being said, it doesn't mean we have to have all of our stuff resolved. What's so powerful? So if we start with ecstatic authenticity, then we move into the ecstatic intimacy. And the ecstatic authenticity is into me, I see. Oh,
Mm.
Zoom
Oh,
makes silly things and I can't control it. I have no idea what makes it do it.
oh my God,
Um,
I love that. It was like,
yeah, the fireworks. But if it's into me, I see, then that allows into me, you see, which means I let you see into me. And it's where we have our challenges. Every relationship will have its challenges, will have its conflicts. And conflicts are not a problem. As a matter of fact, it is our conflicts and our challenges that, if we have and are willing to find the capacity to meet them, they will turn into connection and communion. They will strengthen and deepen the relationship. So, learning how to navigate the wholeness, the imperfectness of relationship is how we get ecstatic authenticity and ecstatic intimacy. And we marry those to get ecstatic ecstasy, where life and lovemaking take our breath away.
mm, love that. I love that. And I'm glad that you brought up the point that, because that is a question a lot of people that I work with have is, do I have to have all of my stuff healed, right? Do I have to have all of my trauma healed? And I'm the first one to say I've been doing this, you know, deep trauma healing work and around. I had a lot of sexual abuse growing up, and did I do quite a bit of healing before I've gotten into this, the relationship I'm in now, the partnership I'm in now, which has been just over 3.5 years? Yes, I did do quite a bit, but I have done so much more in this relationship because I felt safe, right? I felt safe with this person and someone who, I could really be my imperfect self with, right? My
Yes.
imperfect self with. And he still didn't run away.
Yes. But the thing that we have to be careful of is I have so many people that say, as soon as I find someone
Mm.
that will let me be my imperfect self, then I can let go. And it's a both and. We
Yeah.
have to be willing to be loving, kind, compassionate to our imperfect selves for ourselves. And then we can let another amplify that as you're describing. And so I just always want to be careful of, don't go seeking the one that's finally going to make you feel safe enough.
No, no,
To be
no, no.
safe with you
Yes,
and compassionate and loving with you. And then they can enhance and expand to that.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I don't think I would have attracted someone who was as accepting of me if I hadn't done a good deal of that we'll just call it the self-love, self-acceptance work,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So it
absolutely.
sounds like when people come through your door, that's where they start.
Even couples,
Yeah.
because the partnership, the we of the couple is made up of two me's. And if these two me's are people pleasing, which is one of the ways that we try to keep a relationship strong,
Yep.
or if we're playing into I gotta grasp, which is another form of people pleasing, it would be the anxious attachment style as it's spoken of, or that avoidant. I want to be close, but I don't want to be close. And there's this push pull dynamic. And then the pulling away, we have all these strategies that we come in with. But it is that capacity to allow our strategies in ourselves and with each other that do allow us to have that strong relationship.
And I'm glad you brought up those pieces. I talk a lot about people pleasing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't to some degree struggle with that? I mean, most of us were taught that growing up as children, right?
absolutely.
Starting with our parents, and then it moved to teachers and peers, and of course, that I think that codependent relationship model is just what most of us grew up with.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we don't even realize. I think a lot of people don't even realize that's what they're doing.
absolutely. And Margaret Paul writes about, and I was teaching this for a long time, and one of my program participants several years ago brought a Margaret Paul article to me that said it so powerfully. As for those that don't know Margaret Paul, she's been a couples therapist for over 40 years. And one of her core premises is that the number one destroyer of intimate relationships is self abandonment. And self abandonment and people pleasing are intimate partners. We must self abandon in order to people please. It's making the other person's needs, wants, and desires more important than our own because we think that's what will sustain partnership. But it never does. It destroys partnership because it breeds resentment, it breeds disappointment. And so, again, two me's coming together make the strong we. And so, yes, as you were saying, the self is the key to having the me, two me's is the key to having a strong we.
And I think that a lot of us were taught that to have a strong relationship, somebody has to sacrifice.
Yes.
I think that is a really big belief system that is I'm going to say crumbling, right? Is it's crumbling with we're actually moving. I don't know if you're into astrology, Joanna, but we're moving from the Pluto and Capricorn to Pluto and Aquarius tomorrow. And Aquarius is all about community, communication, and connection. So I find that I just remembered that and find that that's fascinating that we're talking today as we're moving into that because so many people, you know, have sacrificed themselves because they thought, oh, this is what love is. Like I saw
Yes.
that growing up. I don't know what you saw growing up with your parents, but that's what I saw.
We are very conditioned to the idea of if you're a good person, you will look out for other people.
Yes.
And it is the most damaging thing that we can do to ourselves and to the relationships that we most care about. Coming back to, like, it's got to be something. I don't know. Haven't had it happen in a while. But that it is the one of the biggest rewiring things that we need to do is realize the importance of who we are as individuals, what we came here to learn, what we came here to enjoy, what we came here to contribute. And all of that matters so much. Our retreat 2 weekends ago was sacred sexuality.
Hmm.
But before we can talk about sacred sexuality, we have to talk about sacred you. We have to talk about the preciousness, the pricelessness of the two beings that are coming together to consider a sacred, intimate connection.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I want to talk more about that. So what
Yes.
is soul love?
Yeah. Oh, soul love. It is that love that is indescribable. It's the closest thing that I could say to unconditional love that I think we could ever experience. Because it starts with when I talk about love 360 degrees, it's this love of self and all of the messiness that we came in with. And there isn't a single human being on the planet that didn't come in with messiness and hasn't had things that created messiness and our struggles to trust ourselves and believe in ourselves, and some more so than others, but we're all on a journey and it's in different areas of our lives. But soul love takes us back to the uniqueness of me in its blessings and its challenges, and the uniqueness of you and its blessings and its challenges that we find each other in a way that is harmonious, but not rainbows and unicorns. Because true soul love is really actually going to push our buttons. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make about soulmate relationships. Is there's the idea that if I meet my soulmate, it's going to be exquisite and beautiful all the time.
No
No,
problems, no issues, no
no
issues.
problems, no issues. And then it's like, wait, we had a problem. There's something wrong in our relationship. No, you are meant to have problems. Soulmates come together to evolve each other's souls, which means knowing how to navigate those button pushes is absolutely critical. And when we do, the strength of the love gets so much stronger,
Yes, it does.
so much deeper.
Yeah. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm just thinking like, oh my God, I've always been one of those people that I'm almost always in a relationship. And I was told, I don't remember all the people that told me this, but that I grow the most when I'm in relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't had periods of time, but if I look back at each of my relationships and they all had their challenges, I can see what growth I had in each of them.
Yes.
Right. So, and it's not that like neither of us was good or bad, and that's not why it ended. It was just time to move on. Right. And I think the important thing is finding somebody that's willing to hang in there. Um, yeah, if
Yeah.
you could speak more on that. I mean, I think I've had people before that weren't willing to hang in there with me. And I'm just going to say it, right? I don't have an easy history.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so the willingness to hang in has everything to do with that self relationship. Because when your stuff comes up, it's potentially going to push the other person's buttons. But the more that we can see, oh, wait, she's got something happening, I have something happening. How can we tend to both things? And we have to be willing to tend to ourselves first so that then we can tend to the partner. And so it's building up. I always say the strength of the relationship with you determines or limits the strength of the relationship you can have with anyone else.
Mm.
And so when it's that capacity to hang in there, like that tenacity is really, really powerful. Sometimes we have to hang in through the most difficult things. But what's key in that is that some people stay too long
I
in the
was
wrong
You must
relationships.
have been reading my mind. I was just going to say, but
Yeah,
Joanna, how do we
right,
know when not to hang? When is it?
right,
When is it time
right.
to move on? Right? The soul
Yes,
contract's done.
absolutely. And so it's really noticing, how did you get into the relationship? If we came in with any level of settling, this is good enough. It's better than nothing. As one person, one of my mentors years ago said, the BTN, the better than nothing relationship. So if we come in needing that connection, because it's going to complete us, like we talked about earlier,
We're afraid of
that,
being alone, right? Because
huh,
we're afraid of because
we're
we're
afraid of being
afraid of
alone.
being alone. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the thing that keeps singles single is their fear of being alone, because they'll get into a relationship that's not right for them. It busts up. They end up single. They get into a relationship that's not right for them. It breaks up. They end up single. So the sustained singleness is really because so often we're not choosing the right partner. We're settling, selling out, twisting ourselves into a pretzel to have a relationship. So
Mm.
if we've done that, we have to be looking at, is this the right relationship? Do these two people have the capacity and the commitment to this definition of soul love that we were just talking about? And if that's there, and both people came into the relationship not from a place of needing or desperateness or loneliness, but from a place of wholeness. Then looking at the truth of the soul's work that wants to happen.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I'm just, again, thinking back through, it's like my file. And yeah, boy, I had, looking back, I had, as I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, I had quite a few, if I'm honest with myself, that, you know, yeah, I definitely settled. Like, a part of me knew, right?
As
Part of me
most,
knew, like, but
as
yeah, but put the red flags to the side,
yeah.
as we often do, because, I don't know about you, but I have a gift of seeing people's potential, not always
Mhm.
a good thing. But yeah, yeah, I love that question. For those of us that are in a relationship now that are kind of wondering, do I hang on, or, how did I get in this? Like,
Yeah,
what was at the foundation, and not to judge yourself for that, but just, yeah, I call it compassion and curiosity, right?
totally.
Compassion and curiosity.
Absolutely. 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 But if we're willing to walk through the hard times, if it's really both people choosing it, their soul alignment, and we're willing to work through the hard stuff, the potential for ecstasy is incredible. But we have to watch for that place of self abandonment to try to make the relationship work. Authentic relationships, here's another like really simple statement. Authentic relationships are the safest relationships,
Mm.
but we are so conditioned to not reveal our true selves. But that makes it more risky for both people.
Right. If we just come in and we are completely being who we are, and we're not, twisting and contorting and like, oh, who do they want me to be? Right. If we know who we are, which I think a lot of people too. I'm just thinking back to my parents. They got married when they were 19.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty common back then, right? You can't know who you are at 19. I doubt that,
Mm-mm.
right? I really doubt that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of people that don't know who they are, and are, just showing up and trying to be what they think the other person wants.
Absolutely. And I just want to say for those that have been together a long time and you're struggling, like you can find yourselves. And quite often there's a reason that you came together. And that reason can sustain you through the rediscovery of self. And so whether I've worked with couples, I have one gentleman that joined our program the year of his 49th anniversary because he wanted his 50th anniversary to be a different experience. I've worked with couples that have been married, so between 30 and, well, a lot young, but 30, 50 years, they can still find their way, even when there's been a struggle. They can still find their way back in, even though they might not have chosen it for the right reasons, but it's something to pay attention to in the process.
That's beautiful to hear. Like, yeah. And, if both people are willing to do that, I think that's pretty amazing. Right? But I've seen it. I'm seeing it. We are making a big shift. People that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s are realizing, you know what? I don't have to settle.
Yes.
And I'm never too old.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter,
Yes.
right? It can be different now. It can be different now.
Absolutely. I had a woman that I got to witness. She did some clearing work of some deep, I would say trauma, my word, but from her teenage years. And she was 92. And she opened her eyes and she said, now I get to start living my life. I have another couple. He was in his 80s. She was in her late 60s saying, we're having the best sex of our lives. Like, I love working with 20 somethings so that we can get this flowing from the beginning.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if you're 80 or 90. You can have this.
Yeah.
And the joy of being yourself and the joy of witnessing another be themselves and sharing it. So powerful.
Feel it in my heart space.
Mm.
Yeah. And, I've never, I honestly didn't think it was possible for me, what you're talking about. So, someone who again came from a pretty um, rich history of abuse, like, yeah, I just never thought I would have something that I do now. So, for everyone out there who's like, it's not possible for me, right? It's possible for everyone. It's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is never too late. It is absolutely possible.
So, Joanna, I was going to ask the question, is it possible for everyone? But yes, it is. We've already talked about that. So how can we start loving soul to soul? I know that you said, it starts with us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our own authenticity, getting to know ourselves, and accepting what we find,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
accepting what we find.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could just take us a little bit more into that, and then what are the next steps after that?
Absolutely. So, again, another premise of ecstatic intimacy in the soul love journey is the Rumi quote that says, it's not for us to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers we've built against it. And we've spoken about a lot of those barriers. And many of them are our beliefs about love, about intimacy, about masculine and feminine dynamics, or the whole gender spectrum. I mean, that plays out significantly in our relationships. And it plays out in our sexual dynamics. It plays out in our attraction dynamics. It plays out in our trust dynamics. And so, really finding soul to soul love in ourselves and in another is really much more of recognizing that we are inherently a diamond, a brilliant being with its flaws and its imperfections. And we have to remove the obscurations. We have to remove the mud and the whatever has gotten packed on top and around that diamond, sometimes where it's gotten buried away. And so it's much more about the subtraction than it is the addition. You don't have to add anything. You are perfect. I say that to Tanya because she and I are having a conversation, but every listener, you are perfect as you are. We have strategies that we have taken on that are not supportive. And then we have to create a safe space to recognize, one, that those strategies aren't supportive for our heart and our highest good and our true ecstasy. And then in that safe space, to start asking the key questions, to start going through the key experiences that have us keep revealing our self, our heart, our vulnerability, our authenticity, so that we can be loved fully for who we are. And we feel safe loving another, knowing that loving is risky, but that's the essence of love, is that while we may lose for many, many, many reasons, to not have loved fully would be the greatest heartbreak of a life.
That quote, yeah. I don't even know who that quote is
Yeah,
from, but
it's
but
T oh
Elliot? Is it Elliot?
no, it's not Elliot. I can see it. It's just but Lord Tennyson.
Lord,
It's better to have loved than lost, and loved and lost than to never have loved at all.
yeah, yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that in. I've, as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I've had quite a bit of heartbreak, and yet nothing in me wanted to stop looking.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I didn't want to give up on that, right? And
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't because, you know, when you finally, and who knows, right? We never know how long something's going to last,
Right.
right? Death or, you know, well,
Ab-
who knows? Who knows in this, you know,
Absolutely.
who
Ab-
knows? But I think for me at least, it's worth it because to have a life with no love,
Yeah.
and I was really afraid of love. I mean,
Me
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, still am. To be honest, parts of me still are, you know, parts of
Absolutely. And that's the key we keep opening. How deeply can we love? How deeply can we love? So even if somebody has lost hope, we can refine that hope. We just need some self-care to find that hope again, to find that willingness to open again. And so even if you aren't sure you have the capacity to love again, you do in the right circumstances, with the right support, with the right TLC for you. And the beauty far outweighs the pain so often. Not, no, actually, I want to say that again. When we truly meet it, the beauty always outweighs the pain. Always.
Yeah, and even like even the ones that have ended, I'm just thinking back, like there were a lot of good times,
Yeah.
right? Even though at the end it was, you know, ouch.
Yeah. But the gifts, I think the thing that we have to so often look back is even when it was really painful, what did it give us? And there are so many ancient teachings that say in our hardest times, we find our greatest gifts. And so even if it didn't have a lot of goodness in it, it it brought us to where we are now. And it was here to teach us something. And if we'll open to that lesson, so much can happen. So much can happen.
I think we forget that, you know, as souls, we came here to have contrast and to have, you know, we came to grow and we came to, you know, all of it. And this is and relationships are the biggest part of it.
Yes, relationships are our greatest teachers if we're willing. Relationships, well, and here's the thing, if we're not willing, we're just going to suffer because then we struggle and we get hurt and we get, and not that that doesn't happen here, but when we have the resources to go, okay, this is painful right now. Oh, I'm afraid right now. Oh, I'm struggling right now. Ah, oh, this is for me, not happening to me. This is happening for me. That, oh, in these crunchy moments are the greatest gifts. And the key is just learning how to navigate them so that we can move through in a way that is graceful, easeful, and deepening in love.
Yeah, everything, tools, right? We need tools,
Yes.
right? We need
Yes.
tools, and most of us aren't taught those relationship tools growing up. Unfortunately, I didn't learn them.
No, no, no,
My poor parents, they had no tools. They had
no.
none.
And, but fortunately, we've got a lot more communication and a lot more conversation and a lot more places where we can come and really learn those tools and learn how to really be in love. I'll go back to 360 degrees because that's where the greatest joy, the ecstasy of life is
Yeah.
within us, between us, and beyond us.
There's another point that I'm being guided to bring up too, that I think why some people want to throw in the towel if it doesn't work the first time. It seems like there's I think it's dissolving, but there's this belief system that a lot of us grew up with that you were going to find the one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't want to leave the first one or even the second. I mean, I have a friend who's been married 4 times and,
Yeah.
you know, and she feels a little shame about that. And I'm like, don't, right? Don't. Because this belief that there is the one,
Right.
like what I would love to hear your perspective on that. Because, you know, there's
Yeah.
a lot of people walking around that say, oh, I have one soulmate and I have to find that person.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. And really, there are so many different ways to walk the path of love. There are so many different ways. And we have a definition of success that's quite common that says, I meet a person, we go on a date, we get engaged, we get married, and we live happily ever after until death do us part. And while that's one potential path, there are many, many, many paths to exquisite love. And maybe it'll look like that path at one point, and then maybe it'll be a very different path at another point. But our souls are always guiding us, our souls are always leading us. And so there's not one person, there are many that can lead us, meet us in and on our path to ecstasy. And it takes very, very different forms for
Just
different
got,
people. I
I just
know,
got,
darn Zoom is making thumbs up signs now.
no, I love it. This has only ever happened with you and one of my other clients. And it's just perfect. I love it. Like the thumbs up exactly when you were saying something that was so perfect. It's it's the universe saying yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. But
Oh,
yeah, I just felt like that was an important thing to bring up because I know I have worked with people that have yeah, that have had that belief system we've needed to work through, right? Like they didn't want to they knew they it, hanging in there wasn't meant to continue. But, you know, they had taken vows, they had, you know, been together since they were childhood sweethearts,
yeah.
and they felt like a failure. And that's
Yeah.
why they didn't, you know, moving on would have meant to them like they were a failure. So we had to work through that, and that was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no way to fail at love unless we quit.
I was going to say, unless we don't be a quitter.
And if you quit for a year, great. If you quit for 10 years, great. If you quit for 20, just get back on the path. Just
Well,
get back
and
on.
I'd love you to talk about that. Sometimes we do need a break, right? Or
Yeah,
I've needed a break, you know? Sometimes I get out of one and I'm like, okay, I don't want to repeat that again.
totally. That when a relationship breaks up, it is an invitation to go within. It is an invitation to go back to us. And what so many people are conditioned to do is get back out there, get back out there. But we just get back out there and repeat the same patterns. So how are we doing conscious completions? How are we doing conscious endings? And that doesn't require the other person. That other person may be in a conscious endings, but they don't have to be. But what are we doing? What are the lessons? What are the things that we're taking from this? How are we growing and expanding? What have we discovered about ourselves that we want to bring in, and doing that
Mm.
consciously, doing that intentionally, so that transition after a relationship, that time is fertile and rich with evolution. And so it's really important. And sometimes that is taking time to have a relationship with ourselves, to have a relationship with ourselves more deeply so that we can have a relationship with another. Going back to the idea of the strength of the relationship with ourselves determines the strength of the relationship we can have with another. So taking time off doesn't mean that we're not on the path of soul love. It's just that we're bringing love here to self for a change. So it's still the
Beautiful.
path of love.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad that you said that because I could hear that question out there.
Yeah,
It's not that,
absolutely.
and I wasn't giving up. I knew I was getting back on this, you know, gonna come back at some point. But yeah, about my last one, my last break was about 2 years. I just knew I needed to refine my relationship with myself.
Absolutely. And for some people, the reason they don't go back out is because I don't ever want that to happen again. And that vow isn't what we were just talking about. That time off from a protective standpoint is not, I'll say, quality time off. It's actually separating us from the love that we are all meant to have as beings walking in these human forms.
Mm.
And so it's okay to be scared too. it's okay to say, I don't want that to happen again. But those vows can push away what is meant for us. And so tending to the hurts, getting support to walk through the fears and the walls of protection that get built, because that kind of isolation is very different than having a love affair with yourself. Those
Very
are two
different.
different ways to take a break.
And I prefer for the one where I'm getting to know myself more versus the I'm not going to ever be hurt again.
Yes.
I'm not going to
Don't
let
want,
anyone in.
yes. Too painful, all of that.
Beautiful. So we're going to open up for some questions here. If anybody has a few questions, and you can raise your hand. Where did Zoom put that now? Zoom's always moving stuff.
It's right in
Um,
the middle on the bottom of mine.
okay, cool. So yeah, it depends on how you guys are looking on your computer, on your phone, but there is an area where you can raise your hand. So we'll give a few minutes for people to do that. And while people are wondering or getting the courage to ask a question, um, Joanna, you can tell us a little bit about your free gift, the Ecstatic Intimacy Jumpstart Kit, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm going to
So
put the link while Joanna is sharing about that. I'm going to put the link in our chat.
awesome. So the Jumpstart kit, there's actually, when you get to the page, there'll be two choices. There's a singles version and a couples version. And within that Jumpstart kit, whichever one you pick, there's going to be a different perspective, but you're going to look at masculine, feminine dynamics and the attractive forces and the challenges that can come in with some of those masculine, feminine dynamics. You're going to get a chance to look at aspects of sexuality and what's supportive us for us to be considering as singles, as partnered or married couples. And then also, it's going to guide you through this path of soul love and what is important at each of these phases and how, excuse me, I've been talking all day. How can that, how can we be guided? What's our personal path on that path of soul love? So it allows you to really look at how could I walk this path? And so you'll find those different pieces in your kit to really support you in love, in intimacy, in ecstasy. And I just have to say, ecstasy, that word scares some people. So
It
let's just say,
does. It does. I'm so glad that you said that. It would have
I've had
scared me in the past. It would have scared me.
absolutely. And I've had people tell, clients that have told their friends, and they're like, ecstasy in the title? Nope, I am not going. I won't even go to the website.
So
And
weird. What is she going to do? Yeah,
what,
like
yes, it is. And really, the ecstasy, we get that idea so associated with sexuality. And sure, that's one path to a really good time. But true ecstasy are the moments that, again, as we talked about in the beginning, render us in spaces that we can't describe, that are the most beautiful experiences. And there's this idea that ecstasy is this big, wild thing. Sure, we could have an experience that shows up that way, but for most people, ecstasy can actually be quite deep, quite quiet, but so profound that we're in an indescribable state of joy and connection and even union.
beautiful. I'm glad that you brought that up because I know that a lot of people think ecstasy equals orgasm.
Right.
And it's not that it can't equal that,
Yeah.
but I'm actually thinking about like as you're talking again, I'm like, oh my God, I actually had that experience of ecstasy and it would no one would have ever thought that that would have equaled that. But as you're talking about it, I'm like, that was that for me. Um, I've been doing ketamine assisted therapy for about a year and a half now for PTSD and had a session on Friday. And my speedy has to drive me there and bring me home because you can't drive afterwards. And
Yeah.
it's 2.5 hours. And it was a really rough session. And I didn't look so pretty afterwards. I threw up. Like it was, and he was just like rubbing my back and like touching my hair. And I mean, I felt like shit. I fell asleep on the way home, like got me into the house. Like, I'm just thinking like that was ecstasy. Somebody taking care of me
Yes.
in a
Yes.
way that I've never really been taken care of before when I felt horrible, like
Yes.
physically, mentally, emotionally. I felt like a piece of garbage.
Yes. The
And
depths
my
of love.
God, that was ecstasy.
Yes.
You
The
taken care.
depths of love.
Yeah.
Ecstasy.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
makes my heart melt. Yeah. So, yes, I know this is it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And so I know that, not everyone here might be comfortable asking questions. So if somebody has a question, Joanna, that they're just not comfortable asking here, is there a way that they can contact you and get that question to you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can email soul love at ecstatic intimacy or go to ecstaticintimacy.com and go to the contact page. And there's a way that you can submit a question there too. And
Awesome.
be sure if you are sending a question and you've listened to this podcast, if you do send a question, please say that you spoke on this podcast because I can't answer everyone's questions that email in, but for this podcast, I will make sure that to the best of my ability, I answer your questions. And but I'll need to know for sure that you're from this podcast. So please just mention that in your question. I was on and I wanted to ask.
Yeah, you were on
So
the Evolve podcast and you wanted to ask a question. So I did put the link to your website in the chat as well. So any little parting words of wisdom for us, Joanna? Anything just from that your soul just feels like it needs to express before we close our beautiful conversation?
yes, love is, in my opinion, the most exquisite experience that we could ever have. And love takes on so many forms, and there's so much confusion, and there's so much fear. And so, as I say to every single person, take one step at a time. And sometimes that's a baby step at a time, and sometimes that's a baby step at a time. But if we keep taking a step, no matter how big it is, we will find ourselves in something that we had no idea was possible. And I hear that time and time again from people. I had no idea this was possible. And so all it takes is to start. Just start. Get yourself connected where you're being supported in your beauty and in your mess, in your fears and in your courage. And how do you leverage that courage to support your fears?
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And you inspired someone to raise their hand.
I
So
see that.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, Teresa. I don't know if I can pin three
Okay.
people. I
Yep,
can.
I think I'm unmuted.
You are. Hello,
Okay.
welcome.
So I'm taking bold, uncomfortable action here.
Nice.
Yay, good for you.
Right. What the heck? I don't have video on. Nobody else that does either. So my last relationship, I've had a couple failed marriages or learning experiences, I guess I should say. So my most recent relationship, I thought this was going to be it. It was a person who had years in the education field. We had shared a lot of common activities. He was very bold and comfortable with his sexuality, whereas I've struggled somewhat because I've had such mixed messages over the decades. Mostly being dismissed and being cold shouldered and things like that. And here he was the opposite. And I thought, this is fun. This is sexy. I want to be able to express myself more freely. But it turned to another side. He's had abuse as a youth, and there was a very addictive quality to it where I felt like it always had to be bigger, better, more like porn kind of
Yeah.
stuff that was really like what was fun and sexy at first became, dismissive. Like I said, what he said, what do you want? What do you want? Whatever. Tell me what you want, what you don't want. And I'd say, you know what? I've always wanted somebody that would be comfortable enough to experience tantra with and go through that. And his response was, oh, I don't need that. So it was really here I opened myself up and it was totally dismissed.
Yeah.
And so I started not feeling safe. Okay, you're asking me what I want and then dismissing me and me, the people pleaser. I think I absorbed a lot of I thought I was the anxious one, which I sort of was, but I felt like that porn piece had an anxiety to it also. Can you speak to that? I mean, I whatever is consensual is fine. I mean, I'm not being judgmental. It started feeling dismissive or coercive if he didn't get what he wanted, even though he'd ask me to express myself and then it wasn't honored.
Yeah. Well, and this, Teresa, that you're pointing at takes us back to that relationship with self. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to find a relationship so strong here that we have our yes and our no.
Mm-hmm.
We know where those boundaries are. And no matter what the other person desires, likes, doesn't like, we have to honor, of course, their boundaries. And yet, no matter what they want, we have to stay in honor of ourselves. It's the only place. And it's interesting. There's actually a question from PJ that I feel in the chat that I feel like almost has a very similar answer. Is that self safety? Being safe with another requires being safe with ourselves. And being safe with ourselves basically means we're going to have our back. It means if something's not okay for us, we're going to speak up about it. And if they cross that line, then we learn how to navigate those boundaries so that we actually step away when our boundaries are being crossed. So it takes me back to this truly honoring of ourselves so that we can say no. And if they don't honor our no, then we have to say no to that too.
Mm-hmm.
And so nothing wrong with your desires, nothing wrong with your boundaries, nothing wrong with expressing that. Does the other person show up in a way that honors that? Not
Right.
perfectly, but consistently.
Right. I mean, and Tanya, what you said about, after the ketamine, which I have experienced that also. And yeah, it's a tender place and it's a vulnerable place. And last time I had a horrible job, and when I came home and just needed like a shoulder to cry on for a minute, his reaction was knock it off. Like I needed to leave the job if you're not happy. Like there was and so the trust was just gone, which is so sad because there were so many good things too. And um I want to be a better communicator, I guess. So that's why I'm taking this. I went out on a limb here.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I also hear masculine, feminine dynamics in it as well, Teresa. There's a lot of things that if you and I were spending time together that I would dive into. But kudos, kudos for taking that bold action. And these pieces of coming to know you and how to communicate, because that's the other part is then once we know ourselves, how do we actually communicate that in a way that the other person can hear?
Right.
And if we're in a heterosexual relationship, or even if it's same-sex relationship, there's usually a masculine feminine dynamic. And the masculine hears and says things and does things and has needs that are different than the feminines. And we have to learn to understand and speak each other's languages and recognize, oh, they're hearing me through a masculine vocabulary. How do I translate this? Or could you articulate this because I'm speaking from my feminine place. So we also want to get into those aspects as well. Because masculine beings want to fix things, feminine beings don't want to be fixed.
Want to be
Mm.
heard.
How
They
do we
want to
work
be
with
heard.
Right, absolutely. And I think I felt okay by being more open sexually. That's that feminine side that I feel like I've been missing out on, but it stopped feeling feminine
Absolutely.
when it
Absolutely.
had to be his way or it was discounted.
Totally. Then it becomes, it's, if anything, it's shadow feminine, but it's not the enlivened, awakened, beautiful, ecstatic feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Getting you back to that is what I would say is the most important.
Right, right. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa, for being brave.
All right, somebody else. Who's just going to be brave next?
Well, and I'm just going to add, and whether it's an answer to yours, Teresa, but I'm just feeling this like, I think a lot of us, you know, I'm not going to say all men, but men oftentimes have become, they've learned to be emotional through the sexual act, whereas women tend to want that actual connection and emotional exchange and support. Doesn't have to be the sexual act.
Yes.
So yeah, so it feels like Teresa, like you wanted, like you came home and you like wanted that emotional like support, like wow, that sucks, the kind of day you had, like not the fixing thing, right? So that's, it doesn't sound like that's there, and that's the
Right,
part that
right.
you're wanting.
If I had had a 1 minute hug and just let me cry for a minute, we could have had great sex that night. I would have felt safe and supported, but I didn't. Because I didn't have that piece.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
So,
this is a journey, I was going to say, this is a journey for both the masculine and the feminine, because the feminine learning how to be conscious with their emotions and the masculine learning to not be afraid of those emotions.
mhm,
Like we could talk for literally hours on this particular dynamic of emotions. And emotions are always the realm of the feminine. And so predominantly masculine beings, it's a difficult place for them. And how do we
mhm,
help them grow through that, as long as they're being conscious with us as well? And when they're being unconscious with us, how do we ask for what we need? And then when someone shows us over time that they can't meet us there consciously, then how do we potentially make a conscious transition?
mhm,
And Tanya, I just want to say something to what you said, is that men try to get to their emotionality through sexuality. I just want to actually give men a little bit of credit there.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
that they try to, they actually do.
Right, right, and that's what
They
they learn
actually,
too, and that's what they
it's
learn.
not learned.
Oh, it's
It's
not
not,
learned. Oh,
it's
wow,
not learned. It's
wow,
absolutely not learned, not in my experience.
wow.
And that's why I was like, I want to be careful here not to
Yeah,
judge
please.
men around
Yeah, yeah.
that truly the difference, and we don't have enough time to cover all of this, but truly that the relationship of the yang or masculine at the heart of the yin or feminine, and the yin at the heart of the yang or masculine. And so it is actually a secondary, the emotions for a predominantly masculine being, the emotionality is actually secondary or complementary for them. And we have to learn that actually when we get into the sexual centers and the ways that our energy moves and how a masculine being ignites a feminine being, is that the masculine does get to their heart through their sex, and feminine beings get to their sex through their heart, which sounds like a cosmic joke and a problem, but it's actually why we're great teachers for each other.
Right, right.
It's why we actually have to know how to navigate the ups and downs, and we have to know how to communicate. And so it's not bad that the masculine gets to their emotions through their sexuality. We have to learn how to work with that in honoring both expressions and everywhere on that gender spectrum.
I'm so happy that you explained that. I don't think I knew that information, that not to that. Yeah, not
Yeah,
quite
it's a
like that.
super,
Yeah.
super important piece.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, the way that feminine beings need their sexuality treated and honored is how masculine beings need their hearts treated and honored.
Mm.
And the feminine can be very damaging to a masculine heart when she's not conscious. And a masculine being can be very damaging to a feminine being's sexuality. And it can happen in reverse. Like, that's not an absolute, but there's a lot to talk about in that space that's very misunderstood. And when we can come together and talk about it, we can do immense healing.
Wow.
We can do immense healing individually and collectively.
That makes me want to come to a retreat even more now, Joanna.
Please do.
No, seriously, seriously. And just to add to, when you were talking about, the responsibility of communication, um, again, the way that you're describing it makes so much sense now too, because I would say to my sweetie, I don't feel, this is in the beginning of our relationship, like I don't feel emotionally supported by you. And he was like, well, so tell me what you need.
Right.
And I couldn't tell him.
Right. Right.
I couldn't tell him because
Yes.
for whatever reason. And so I had to ask myself, okay, what is it that I'm looking for him to do?
Yes. And so we spend a lot of time in our retreats starting to dive in and pull this apart so we can actually begin to really understand each other and recognize that the things that frustrate us are also the things that we love. And if we can learn to bridge those gaps and we can learn to understand ourselves so that we can offer it to the other, and the other starts to learn us so that, oh, wait, I get what's going on. I'm in my world, not her world. And it very much changes things. So it's super important that we start to understand these differences and how to express them and recognize them.
Wow, I'm glad. Thank you, Teresa, for asking that question, because that just opened up a whole, a lot more. So yeah, thank you.
Really did.
Oh, yay.
Yay.
Oh, yeah, this is it's complicated. Yeah.
Complicated, but so important and so
Yeah.
powerful. And actually, it gets easier and easier as we dive in.
It does get easier. It is getting easier for me. And it is getting easier for my sweetie too, that I could now be able to express what it is, right? Because we're not taught like how to ask and to, all of that stuff. So, oh, Joanna, thank you so much for being here and for your time and sharing this really important wisdom with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It is my honor. I wish you all many blessings. And if there's any way that I can support you, please reach out. And it is my commitment to see the world in love, happy and in love. So if I can serve you in any way, please reach out.
Yeah, so just a reminder for everyone that you can, of course, those of you that are live with us, there's 2 links in the chat. One is for Joanna's Ecstatic Intimacy Jumpstart Kit, and the other one is the link to her website. And those listening to the replay can find both of those below the video. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us for this podcast, whether you have been live or listening to the replay. And feel free to share this with others in your life. This is where it's at. Everything's about love. Everything's about relationships. And again, we're not, most of you have not been taught this, or you wouldn't be here listening to this today, whenever you find this. So pat yourself on the back for having the courage to click play for something that says love, intimacy, sex, because, ecstatic intimacy. Yes, yes. And make sure to listen to all the conversations, all the episodes, because we really are here to rise to our next divine level. So, and helps others to support to do that as well. So, thank you, Joanna, and thank you, everybody, and sending everybody lots of courage and compassion to keep going. This is a really intense time on the planet right now. I understand that. And we need support and we need tools. So make sure that you find that for yourself. All right. Love you guys. Hope to see you soon. Thank you, Joanna.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.